Have you ever felt like someone doesn't like you and you can't really figure out why? Yeah, this is a very confusing and unsettling experience even me have passed through. I remember how I felt then. It left me feeling like I was walking on eggshells around these people. I'm unsure of what really went wrong or why the relationship feels strained. Luckily, I found out a way though, due to the repeated subtle patterns of this people. The good news is, with a little awareness and a sharp eye, you can spot these subtle signs that someone dislikes you, even when they're doing their best to hide it. In this video, I will show you 7 signs to look out for, each one sneaky enough to make you second-guess yourself, but clear enough once you know what to look for. The goal isn't to make you paranoid or overthink every interaction, but to help you identify if someone's feelings towards you have shifted and to empower you to deal with it accordingly. When it comes to relationships, whether they're friendships, family bonds, or even professional connections, recognizing when something isn't quite right is important. Sometimes people try to hide their true feelings, pretending that everything is fine when in reality, their actions are saying otherwise. One of the most common ways people hide their dislike is through humor, where they always joke about your flaws. This might seem harmless at first, but when you break it down, there's more going on beneath the surface. If someone is constantly making jokes about your flaws, it's often not just playful teasing. It could be a sign they don't respect you and are hiding their true feelings of dislike. These jokes, which are often framed as light-hearted fun, can feel like a sharp jab even when they're disguised as humor. Think about those times when a person might say something like, "Wow, I didn't know you could actually be good at this." Or, "For someone who's always late, you're actually pretty organized." On the surface, these may sound like compliments or harmless jabs, but underneath, there's a subtle way of saying, "I don't really respect you." And what makes it worse is that they hide it behind a joke, so if you react negatively, they can easily brush it off as just joking or "I didn't mean anything by it." This tactic allows them to disguise their true feelings while still putting you down, all without facing any consequences. People who dislike you but are trying to keep it hidden will often make fun of things that are sensitive to you, like your appearance, your habits, or your achievements. These aren't just random jokes. They're targeted, and they're meant to make you feel insecure. At first, it may feel like just a little teasing. After all, we all joke around with friends, right? But if the jokes start happening frequently, and if they seem to always point out the same flaws, it's a red flag. The more they joke about something you're self-conscious about, the more it chips away at your confidence. Over time, these jokes can leave you feeling small, frustrated, and unsure of yourself. This behavior often comes from a place of jealousy, insecurity, or even a desire to control or undermine you. For instance, if someone is envious of your success or achievements, they might make jokes about your hard work as a way of belittling your efforts. Or, if they feel threatened by you in some way, maybe because you're getting attention in a social group or excelling at something, they might target your weaknesses with humor in an attempt to put you down. It's a subtle strategy they use to make themselves feel better by making you feel worse. Here's an example. Imagine you've been working hard to lose weight and get in shape, and a friend who has always been a little more critical of you says, "Wow, you actually look good. I never thought you'd stick with it." It may sound like a compliment, but it's actually a backhanded comment. They're implying that they never expected you to succeed, and by framing it as a compliment, they make it harder for you to call them out. It's a clever way of expressing disdain without being overtly rude or hostile. It's important to understand that these kinds of jokes can leave a lasting impact. The more someone makes you the punchline of their humor, the more likely it is that you'll start to internalize their negative views. You might begin to second-guess your appearance, your talents, or your achievements, which can harm your self-esteem in the long run. These jokes aren't just harmless fun. They can serve as subtle reminders that the person doesn't really support or respect you. They're masking their true feelings of dislike behind a veil of humor, and if you're not careful, you could end up feeling isolated, insecure, and unsure about your worth. What makes this sign so tricky is that it's easy for the person to get away with it. After all, humor is often seen as innocent and fun, and when it's framed as a joke, it's hard for you to confront it without sounding overly sensitive. But that's exactly why it's so important to recognize this behavior early on. It's a subtle tactic they use to get away with putting you down without any backlash. But just because someone hides their true feelings behind a joke doesn't mean it's not hurtful. So how do you respond to this kind of behavior? The key is to set boundaries and assert yourself without getting defensive. If you notice that a person is constantly making jokes at your expense, don't just laugh it off to avoid confrontation. Instead, politely but firmly let them know that their jokes aren't funny to you and that you'd appreciate it if they stopped. You don't have to get angry or upset, just calmly explain how their words make you feel. By doing this, you're showing that you value yourself enough not to tolerate disrespect, even when it's hidden behind a smile or a joke. If the person continues to make jokes about your flaws after you've addressed it, then it's time to reconsider the relationship. Someone who truly cares about you won't make fun of you in ways that hurt your feelings. They will respect your boundaries and make an effort to support you. But if they persist, it's a clear sign that they may not value you as much as they should. At that point, it may be best to distance yourself from them or rethink the dynamics of the relationship. Sign 2. They give compliments that sting like insults. A compliment is supposed to make you feel good, right? It's a way for someone to acknowledge your efforts, your strengths, or your appearance in a positive way. But have you ever received a compliment that didn't quite sit right? Maybe it left you feeling confused or even hurt, like it was trying to praise you but, at the same time, subtly put you down. That's what we call a backhanded compliment. These compliments are a clever way for someone to undermine you while pretending to be kind. And while they might seem harmless or even flattering on the surface, they carry a deeper, more negative meaning. Backhanded compliments are usually not meant to lift you up. They're often designed to keep you in your place. The person might pretend to be generous with their praise, but in reality, they're making a point to remind you of your flaws or limitations. For example, imagine someone says, "Wow, you did a great job on that project, considering you're so new to this kind of work." At first glance, it might seem like a compliment, but the "considering you're so new" part carries an underlying message of doubt. The person is acknowledging your success, but also implying that they didn't expect you to be capable of doing well. These compliments are usually a form of passive aggression. The person may not have the guts to say something outright, but they still want to send a message that you're not as good as you think you are, or that they're superior to you in some way. These backhanded compliments often target your insecurities, forcing you to second-guess your abilities. When they tell you, "You look good for someone your age," or "You've really come a long way since last time," it's a way of reminding you that you're not perfect and that there's still something lacking. But the person hides this criticism under the guise of a compliment. What's even trickier about backhanded compliments is that they're difficult to confront. If you react negatively, you might seem overly sensitive or ungrateful, which makes it hard to call them out without feeling like you're making a big deal out of nothing. But here's the reality. These disguised insults are a form of manipulation. The person is trying to make you feel inferior, while still maintaining the appearance of being nice or supportive. And if you let them slide, you risk letting them chip away at your confidence without ever realizing how much damage is being done. The way to handle backhanded compliments is to not let them pass unnoticed. Instead of swallowing them whole or laughing them off, challenge the statement in a calm and assertive way. For example, you could say, "I'm curious. What do you mean by that?" Or, "Thanks, but why do you feel the need to point that out?" This will force the person to explain themselves, and in many cases, it'll make them realize that their comment wasn't as harmless as they thought. More importantly, it sends the message that you're not willing to accept disrespect, even if it's disguised as a compliment. Backhanded compliments often come from a place of insecurity or jealousy. If someone feels threatened by your success, or feels that you're doing better than they are, they might use these compliments to remind you of your supposed place. It's their way of keeping you down while pretending to be supportive. But by standing up for yourself and calling out these comments, you can protect your self-esteem and make it clear that you won't tolerate passive-aggressive behavior. At the end of the day, compliments should make you feel good about yourself, not leave you questioning your worth. You deserve to be around people who genuinely want to uplift you, not tear you down with backhanded remarks. If someone consistently gives you compliments that sting more than they support, it's time to evaluate their true intentions and consider whether this relationship is worth your time and energy. Sign 3. They subtly exclude you from plans. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you suddenly realize that you've been left out of social plans without any real explanation? Maybe a group of friends went out, but you didn't hear about it until after the fact. Or perhaps you noticed that everyone else was invited to an event, but you were mysteriously left out. The excuse? It was a last-minute thing, or we just assumed you were busy. It seems harmless at first, but when it happens repeatedly, it's a sign of something more: social exclusion. It's a subtle yet powerful way of showing that someone doesn't truly value you, without having to outright say it. Exclusion can happen in many forms, from not being invited to events to being left out of group conversations. It can be easy to brush off one or two instances as simple misunderstandings, but if you find that it's becoming a pattern, it's time to pay attention. People who dislike you but want to hide it may use exclusion as a passive-aggressive tactic. Instead of confronting you directly or telling you they don't want to spend time with you, they simply leave you out of plans without explanation. This creates a situation where you're left wondering what happened and why you weren't included, all while they avoid the uncomfortable conversation about their true feelings. Social exclusion is a way for them to send a message without having to deal with confrontation. By excluding you from plans, they make it clear that you're not a priority in their life. And since they're not saying anything outright, they can deny any ill intent. They might tell you it was an accident or that they assumed you were busy, but deep down, you know it's more than that. When someone doesn't want to spend time with you, they'll find ways to avoid inviting you, even if it's disguised as a mistake. What makes exclusion so hurtful is that it's often done behind your back, leaving you unaware of the situation until it's too late. For example, if you notice that a friend has been posting pictures of a fun night out with others, but you never heard about the plans in advance, it can feel like a slap in the face. They might offer excuses like, "Oh, I didn't realize you'd be interested," or "It was so last minute I couldn't let you know." But the reality is that if they valued you, they would have made the effort to include you, no matter how last minute the plans were. Being excluded can leave you feeling isolated and unwanted. It's one thing for people to be busy or distracted, but it's another when it's a deliberate act of leaving you out. And the more often it happens, the more you start questioning your place in their lives. Are you really as close to them as you thought? Do they actually enjoy your company, or are you just someone they tolerate? If you find yourself being repeatedly excluded from plans, it's time to confront the situation. You don't have to make a big fuss about it, but you can ask the person directly, "I noticed I wasn't invited to that event. Was there a reason?" It's important to stand up for yourself and not let these feelings of exclusion go unaddressed. By asking these questions, you show that you won't accept being treated like an afterthought. You deserve to be around people who include you and want to spend time with you, not people who push you aside without explanation. Social exclusion is a tactic used by people who want to avoid confrontation while still sending a clear message. But once you recognize it, you can take control and protect your emotional well-being. If someone doesn't make an effort to include you in their plans, it's time to consider whether they truly value your friendship or whether they're simply not interested in having you in their life. You don't need to chase people who don't want to make time for you. Instead, focus on building relationships with those who genuinely care about you and make an effort to be around you. Sign 4. They show disinterest in your life. One of the clearest signs that someone might dislike you but is hiding it is when they show little to no interest in your life. In healthy relationships, people naturally want to know about each other's lives. They ask questions about your day, your dreams, your passions, and they genuinely care about your well-being. But if someone consistently avoids asking about you or seems uninterested in what's going on in your life, it's a subtle way of saying they don't care about you. This disinterest can show up in several ways. When you talk about something important to you, they might offer very little response or even change the subject quickly. They may be physically present, but mentally they're checked out. It's as if they're just waiting for their turn to speak or for the conversation to end. Sometimes they might even seem distracted by their phone or something else in the environment, as if what you're saying doesn't matter to them. This behavior often comes from a place of indifference. Someone who doesn't like you won't be motivated to learn about your life or show interest in the things that bring you joy. They might not outwardly express hostility, but their lack of curiosity about you is telling. You might have noticed that they're much more interested in talking about their own life or the lives of others, but show no effort to ask about yours. It's not because they don't have the time, but because they don't feel any real connection to you. The subtlety here is that this behavior can be easy to overlook. After all, people get busy, right? But when someone consistently ignores your life, your experiences, and your thoughts, it's a signal that they might not have any real emotional investment in you. If you find that every time you bring up something about your life, the conversation either gets dismissed or quickly redirected, it's a sign that you're not valued in the relationship. It's important to pay attention to how much effort someone puts into showing interest in you. If you feel like you're constantly the one doing all the talking, or that your interests and achievements are met with indifference, it's time to reconsider the balance in the relationship. True friends and supportive people show interest in your life. They take the time to ask about your experiences and listen with empathy and respect. One way to handle this situation is to stop offering information about your life unless the person shows interest. If they don't ask or care to know, then why should you keep sharing? Let them feel the absence of your sharing. Sometimes people who are hiding their dislike will only show interest when they feel like they are losing you, but this isn't a reliable or healthy form of connection. A genuine relationship thrives on mutual respect and curiosity about each other's lives. If you realize that someone consistently shows no interest in you, take note of the pattern. It's not something to be ignored. Everyone deserves to have people around them who care about their feelings and their life. If someone is dismissing or ignoring that, it might be a sign they don't value the sign 5. They interrupt you. Often. Have you ever been in a conversation where you can't seem to get a word in? You try to speak, but the person cuts you off almost immediately, talking over you or steering the conversation away from what you were saying. This constant interruption might seem like a sign of eagerness or excitement, but it could also be a subtle sign that someone dislikes you and doesn't value your input. When someone interrupts you often, It's not just a sign of poor conversational habits. It's often a way to assert control over the conversation, dismiss your opinions, and make it clear that they don't think what you have to say is important. People who interrupt frequently tend to dominate the conversation, and by doing so, they establish that their voice is the one that matters most. They may interrupt you in a way that feels dismissive or impatient, as though they can't wait for you to stop talking so they can say what's on their mind. Interruptions are a form of verbal aggression that can leave you feeling unheard, invalidated, and even frustrated. They prevent you from expressing your thoughts or opinions and create an environment where your voice is drowned out by theirs. If you notice that someone constantly interrupts you, it's a sign that they either don't respect you enough to listen or that they're trying to subtly put you in your place. In some cases, they may do this because they feel threatened by what you're saying, or because they want to make sure they're always in control of the conversation. This behavior can be emotionally draining, especially if it happens repeatedly. When you're not allowed to finish your sentences, it feels like your thoughts don't matter. You might start to feel like you're not valued, and your ideas get lost in the shuffle of someone else's need to dominate the conversation. Over time, this constant interruption can wear down your confidence, making you feel like you're not worth listening to. The subtlety of this tactic lies in its frequency. If someone interrupts you once or twice, it's easy to brush it off as an accident. But when it becomes a pattern, it's no longer a mistake. It's a deliberate action. It's their way of showing that they don't want to hear what you have to say, or that they think they have more important things to contribute than you. If you find yourself being interrupted often, it's important to set boundaries in a calm and direct way. You can assert yourself by calmly saying, "I wasn't finished speaking," or "Can I finish my thought before you jump in?" This lets the person know that you value your own voice and that you won't tolerate being talked over. If they continue to interrupt you despite your efforts to assert yourself, it may be time to reconsider the value of your relationship with them. It's difficult to maintain healthy communication with someone who consistently disregards your perspective. Relationship. Sign 6. They keep you at arm's length. Another subtle sign that someone dislikes you but is hiding it is when they deliberately keep you at arm's length. This can show up in different ways, both physically and emotionally. They may avoid close interaction, maintain distance in social settings, or make sure to keep their personal space well defined, even when the situation doesn't call for it. On an emotional level, they might never allow you to get too close, keeping their feelings, thoughts, and personal life locked up from you. This emotional distance is a form of avoidance, signaling that they don't want to allow you to see too much of who they truly are. At first, this behavior can seem like they're just being private or introverted. However, over time, if they consistently put up walls or avoid any deeper connection, it starts to reveal their true feelings. Keeping you at arm's length is a way for them to protect themselves from getting emotionally vulnerable with you. And they do this because they don't want to be emotionally invested in the relationship. They don't like you enough to let you into their world. They're keeping their distance to avoid forming any kind of bond or attachment that might make them feel obligated to be supportive, kind, or caring. This kind of behavior can also manifest in situations where the person becomes overly formal or distant when you're around. They might not offer any physical affection, even if it's something simple like a hug or a pat on the back, even though they freely do so with others. They might respond to your texts or calls with short, detached messages, showing little emotion or effort. They're essentially setting boundaries, but these boundaries are designed to keep you away, to prevent any connection from forming. The reason behind this avoidance is typically rooted in discomfort. People who dislike you might feel awkward being close to you, either because they don't enjoy your presence or because they're emotionally detached from the relationship. Instead of openly confronting their feelings and telling you they don't like you, they keep a safe distance, making sure you don't get too close to them. This distancing can sometimes be more difficult to recognize because it isn't aggressive. It's not something that happens with anger or hostility. It's more passive. They aren't necessarily ignoring you, they just create invisible barriers between you. These walls can feel small at first, but over time they can add up and leave you feeling excluded or rejected without any clear reason why. To deal with this, pay attention to how they act around others versus how they act around you. Are they more open, warm, and engaged with other people but distant and closed off with you? This is a clear indicator that they are not comfortable with you for some reason. And while you can't force someone to let their guard down, you can decide whether you want to continue investing energy in a relationship where emotional distance is a constant. If you realize someone is consistently keeping you at arm's length, it's important to recognize that this behavior isn't accidental. It's a clear message that they don't want to get too close, and you may need to reconsider how much you're willing to invest in this relationship. Surround yourself with people who allow you to get close, who value your connection and want to build a stronger bond. Relationships should be based on mutual closeness and trust, not constant distance and emotional walls. Sign 7. They mimic your actions. Have you ever had the experience where someone seems to be copying everything you do? It might be something as simple as the way you laugh, the phrases you use, or even your body language. At first, it might seem flattering, as though they admire you so much that they want to be like you. But in reality, it could be a subtle sign that they dislike you and are trying to put you in a position where you feel awkward or out of place. When someone mimics your actions, it's often an attempt to undermine you without being direct about it. This behavior is known as mirroring, and while it can be a sign of empathy in some situations, such as when you're bonding with someone, it can also be a form of passive-aggressive behavior. People who dislike you might copy your gestures, tone, or even your opinions, but they do so in a way that makes you feel uncomfortable or self-conscious. They might exaggerate your movements or imitate your speech patterns in a way that seems insincere or mocking. For example, let's say you make a joke, and the person immediately repeats it, but in a way that feels like they're making fun of you. Or you use a certain phrase in conversation, and the person starts using it frequently, perhaps to the point where it feels forced or overdone. Instead of making you feel like you're being admired, it feels like you're being imitated in an awkward, attention-grabbing way. This is often done to throw you off balance and make you feel like you're being watched too closely. The person may also try to make it seem like you're the one copying them, turning the tables on you. The reason behind this mirroring behavior is that the person is trying to make you feel insecure about yourself. By copying you, they're essentially trying to demonstrate that they know how to do things just like you, perhaps even better, without you ever realizing they're subtly belittling you. They may want to confuse you or make you feel like you're not as original or important as you think. This kind of behavior can be hard to recognize at first because it doesn't seem overtly negative. It's not like they're saying anything cruel to your face, but the way they mirror you feels like a constant challenge to your individuality. What makes this even more uncomfortable is that people who mimic you don't always do it in an obvious or exaggerated way. Sometimes it's just a small, seemingly innocent thing, like using a phrase you've been using lately or mimicking the way you sit at the table. And because they aren't being direct, it's difficult to call them out for it without looking like you're being petty or overly sensitive. The person can always claim they weren't trying to copy you or that it's a coincidence, making it hard to confront the situation. If you notice someone constantly mimicking you, it's important to reflect on how their actions make you feel. Are you starting to feel like your uniqueness is being overshadowed by their behavior? Are they making you feel uncomfortable or self-conscious about your own identity? The best way to handle this is to focus on your own self-confidence. Don't let their mirroring throw you off. If necessary, you can subtly call attention to their behavior without being confrontational, such as by jokingly saying, "I see we're on the same wavelength." This allows you to point out what's happening without getting too involved in a confrontation. In some cases, this mirroring can lead to the person unintentionally showing their true feelings. By constantly trying to copy you, they might reveal how much they care about your actions, whether out of jealousy, insecurity, or a desire to undermine you. Either way, it's a sign that they're not genuinely interested in building a healthy, supportive relationship. If you feel like their behavior is making you feel uneasy or less than, it's worth distancing yourself from them and focusing on people who allow you to be your true self. While it's never easy to confront the reality that someone may not like you, understanding these signs empowers you to make informed decisions about your relationships. You don't deserve to be around people who don't respect or care for you. Take these lessons to heart, and don't hesitate to set clear boundaries and distance yourself from people who are not supportive. If you found this video helpful and want to learn more about how to navigate tricky relationships and social dynamics, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more insightful content. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Share this video with your friends and let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Have you noticed any of these signs in your own life? Let's keep the conversation going. Thanks for watching and take care. Let's all be wiser today.